What if everything you believed about your family was a lie? This is the true story of stolen identities, hidden siblings, and a billion-dollar empire built on betrayal. Watch until the end, because the twist will change how you see legacy forever. No one saw her. No one remembered her name. But that blazing afternoon, on a deserted stretch of road baked by the sun, she became the only hope for a man who, from the outside, looked like he had everything. A luxury car stood stranded on the shoulder engine smoking, heat waves shimmering off the hood. Inside, a man pounded his steering wheel in frustration. His name was Grayson Hale, CEO, multimillionaire, face of half the business magazines in the country, and right now, utterly helpless. He glanced at his platinum watch, 11:43 a.m. In just 17 minutes, he was supposed to be in a high-rise conference room pitching the project that would shape the future of his entire company. But instead, he was sweating through his $3,000 Italian suit on a back road with no cell service and no backup. Come on, he muttered, yanking open the hood. A dense cloud of steam erupted, forcing him to stagger back, coughing. He yanked off his tie, frustration mounting. This wasn't supposed to happen, not to someone like him. That's when he heard the rumble of a slow-aging pickup truck. It creaked to a halt a few yards away. A woman climbed out, moving with quiet certainty. Her grease-smeared jeans, rolled-up flannel, and work boots said she didn't belong in his world, but she walked with the kind of confidence that didn't care. "You need help?" she asked, heading straight for him. Grayson looked her over. She wasn't what he was expecting, if he was expecting anyone at all. Her dark skin shimmered in the sun, and her curly hair was pulled back into a no-nonsense bun. "I've got a meeting in 15 minutes, he said sharply. "My assistant's supposed to be sending help, but apparently this part of the country doesn't believe in cell service." The woman didn't flinch, didn't even blink. She stepped right up to the Maserati, peered under the hood like it was a puzzle she'd already solved. "Cooling system," she said flatly. "I can rig it. Won't hold forever, but you'll make it to the city." Grayson narrowed his eyes, clearly unconvinced. "You're sure?" "I'm a mechanic," she replied. "I run a shop 10 miles from here." She turned and walked back to her truck without another word, grabbed her tools and got to work like this was just another Tuesday. Her hands were fast and precise, her movements so efficient it was like watching choreography. 5 more minutes and this engine would have been toast, she said over her shoulder, tightening something he didn't even recognize. These things are beasts, but fragile, like some people. Grayson almost took the bait, but the ticking clock in his head wouldn't let him. "How do you know so much about cars like this?" he asked, catching himself halfway through the thought. "Working in a forgotten little town?" she finished, glancing at him sideways. "I read. I study. I care about what I do. You don't need a skyscraper for that, Mr. Hale." He froze. "You know who I am? You're in the papers a lot." She shut the hood with a solid clunk. "There, you're good to go." Grayson exhaled, the pressure in his chest finally easing. "I owe you. Please." He reached into his wallet, pulling out several large bills. "At least let me thank you properly." She reached for the money, and that's when he saw it. A ring. Antique silver, delicate, with a blue sapphire at the center. Elegant. Familiar. Grayson's world tilted for a second. "Where did you get that ring?" he asked, voice unexpectedly soft. She hesitated, her hand instinctively curled, protecting it. "It was my mother's." Grayson stared, stunned. That ring. That exact ring had once been on a little girl's hand, given to her by a boy under a tree. His mother's ring, the last gift she ever gave him. A promise, made decades ago. The woman looked at him curiously. "Why?" He didn't answer. Couldn't. His heart was thundering, his mind was racing, but she'd already turned away. "If the car acts up, my shop's 10 miles down," she said, sliding her tools back into the pickup. "First left after the Aurora City sign." Grayson stood frozen. Part of him wanted to stop her. Ask more. Demand answers. But the other part, the CEO part, reminded him of the meeting, the investors, the stakes. "That ring," he began. "You're late, Mr. Hale," she cut in, already starting the truck. "They're waiting." The Maserati purred back to life. He drove off, watching her in the rearview mirror until she disappeared into the shimmer of the road. Now imagine this, you're Riley. You've spent your whole life fixing what others broke, only to have the boy who shattered your world walk back in, pretending the cracks never happened. What would you do? Would you slam the door, or finally make him feel what it's like to be forgotten? Back at Hope Mechanical, Riley Dawson worked furiously on a dismantled engine, arms deep in grease and bolts, her movements sharp. "You're going to strip the carburetor like that," her Uncle Marcus warned gently, approaching with a steady gait. Tall, with salt and pepper hair and kind eyes, he was the only one who knew the full story. "He showed up," Riley muttered. "Car broken down. Of course." Marcus's face darkened. "Grayson Hale. The boy who made a promise," Riley said, wiping her hands on a rag, "and then forgot." She exhaled sharply. "He looked me right in the face and didn't recognize me. He saw the ring, sure, but me? Nothing." That night, she pulled out an old wooden box from under her bed. Inside, neatly arranged, were years of newspaper clippings, stories charting Grayson's rise, from tech prodigy to business icon. There was one recent article, his engagement to Charlotte Wynn, heiress to a fashion fortune. Riley stared at it. "By tomorrow," she whispered to the dark, "he won't even remember the ring." But she was wrong. The next morning, an unmarked sedan pulled up outside her workshop. Grayson stepped out, dressed in jeans and a plain shirt. No designer suit, no entourage. "We're not open," Riley said, not looking up. "I'm not here for service," he replied, holding something out in his hand. In his palm sat a tiny wooden brooch, a bird, wings spread wide. Riley's heart stopped. "You kept this?" she breathed. "You gave it to me," Grayson said, voice quiet. "From the orphanage, Willow Creek Home, Orion section. You were the girl who showed me how to carve." Riley stepped back like she'd been pushed. "You said you'd come back," she said softly. "I tried," he said. "But my father, he had other plans." Marcus appeared in the doorway, wiping his hands. He looked Grayson up and down. "So the prodigal CEO returns," he muttered. 2 decades late. "I know I don't deserve your trust," Grayson said, steadying himself. "But I'm here because I need to explain." Riley crossed her arms. "Why now?" Grayson hesitated. "In 3 weeks, I'm supposed to take over my father's company, marry a woman I don't love, and become the person he spent his life shaping me into. And then I saw you. Or rather, I saw the ring." His phone buzzed in his pocket. Call from Charlotte, 6th time. Riley glanced at the screen. Persistent. "She's not my partner," Grayson said. "She's my sentence." Riley blinked. "So, what, you want forgiveness?" "No," he said. "I want answers. And maybe a chance to fix the worst mistake I've ever made." What Grayson didn't tell her was that he hadn't slept since yesterday. After leaving the workshop, he dove into old archives, legal filings, and company databases. Something wasn't adding up. His father had always told him the land where their new business complex now stood was a routine acquisition, clean, legal, uncontested. But last night, something shifted. That ring. That brooch. Riley's face. He started digging. And what he found cracked his entire world open. At the Hale estate, tucked deep inside his father's private office, behind a false panel, was a folder labeled Project Aurora, the same name as the town Riley lived in. Using a key he'd secretly copied years ago, Grayson unlocked the file. What he saw made his blood run cold: purchase agreements, aggressive lawsuits, and one document that chilled him to the bone, a forged death certificate. It belonged to Evelyn Dawson, Riley's mother. "Her mother's not dead," he whispered to himself. He faked it, for land. Meanwhile, back at the workshop, Riley had made her own decision. She couldn't stay silent anymore. She opened a metal drawer under her workbench, pulling out an envelope that had yellowed with age. Inside were documents that had haunted her since she was a teenager. Deeds, letters, and signatures. The logo stamped on all of them? Hale Industries. Marcus looked up as she walked toward him with the file. I'm going to confront him, she said, her voice steady. It's all here. His father's signature. Every page. Marcus ran a hand over his face. Riley, this is dangerous. You know what that family is capable of. They took everything from us, she said, fingers brushing the sapphire ring. I've got nothing left to lose. That evening, Grayson drove back into Aurora City. As he turned into the quiet square at the center of town, his phone lit up. From Riley Central Square, 20 minutes. Come alone. When he arrived, the square was empty. Riley was already there, sitting on an old bench beneath a sprawling oak tree. It reminded them both, unspokenly, of the orphanage yard, where everything started, where everything was lost. For 20 years, Riley said, her voice low, I believed my mother abandoned me. I thought I did something wrong, that I wasn't enough. Grayson sat beside her, eyes filled with guilt. I found something, he said quickly, reaching into his jacket. My father, he lied. He faked your mother's death to get the land. I know, Riley interrupted. She pulled out her own set of papers and handed them to him. She tried to fight. He threatened her life, and then made her disappear, because of this land. The water reserves beneath it, it's worth billions. Grayson flipped through the pages, heart hammering. One signature stood out, his father's, identical to the one in his own folder. How did you get these? She gave them to Marcus, right before she vanished. He waited until I was old enough to understand what they meant. Riley then pulled out a photo weathered, folded at the edges. This is my mom, Evelyn. A woman with kind eyes, a soft smile. On her hand, unmistakable, the same sapphire ring. That land, all of this, Riley continued. That's where the new Hale complex stands now. Built on theft, on lies, on my family's destruction. She looked up. Her eyes didn't blink. Tomorrow, I'm going public. The groundbreaking ceremony, you know the one. All the press will be there. Politicians, shareholders. Grayson stared at her, stunned. I'm going to expose everything, she finished. His phone buzzed again. Another call from his father. 5th time in an hour. He didn't answer. There's more, Riley said. I have a reason to believe. My mother's still alive. Grayson turned to her slowly. What? Where? I don't know. Not exactly. The last sign I had was a letter. 8 years ago. No return address. But the handwriting was hers. Riley hesitated. It came from a psychiatric clinic in New Hope. Grayson ran a hand down his face, thinking, then let's not wait. What? Don't wait until tomorrow, he said, standing. We do it now. Tonight. She frowned. What are you talking about? My father moved the event up, Grayson explained. I found out this morning. He got nervous. Thought someone might leak details. Riley looked away. That someone is me. I still have access to the security system. I know the schedule, the stage layout. I can get you up there right in front of everyone. He won't see it coming. They drove together in silence, Grayson behind the wheel of a plain sedan, nothing flashy. Along the way, he revealed one more thing. He hadn't just found documents. He found the location. Riley, he said quietly, your mother's not in a clinic. She's on a private Hale property, remote, guarded. It's how my father bought Marcus's silence. Her hands clenched in her lap. The event was exactly as expected. Grand, elegant, calculated. A showcase of wealth and power. Towering LED screens, champagne towers. The elite of the corporate world had gathered to celebrate what they believed was another Hale victory. Sterling Hale Grayson's father took center stage in his signature navy suit, eyes gleaming under the spotlights. Grayson, he greeted, arms open as his son approached. Then he saw her. What is she doing here? He asked, sharp as a blade. She's a guest, Grayson replied coolly, with a story you might want to hear. Sterling's smile dropped. My office. Now. In that lavish, glass-walled space above the ceremony, Riley stood her ground as Sterling paced like a caged animal. All right, he growled. What's your price? How much for you to disappear like your mother should have? Riley's voice didn't waver. I want to know where she is. Sterling scoffed. After 20 years? She probably doesn't even remember you. She's alive, Grayson said, stepping in, voice calm. You kept her locked away for decades. Locked away? Sterling sneered. I gave her a house, a caretaker. She agreed to the terms. It was a deal. That wasn't a deal, said a new voice at the door. That was blackmail. Marcus stood in the doorway, holding the hand of a woman with eyes identical to Riley's. Mother, Riley whispered. Evelyn Dawson took one trembling step forward. Riley, she breathed. My baby. Across the room, Charlotte Wynne stepped into view, silent and composed. In her hand, a smartphone, recording every word. The reunion was raw, emotional, and devastating. Grayson watched it unfold. His mind raced, his gut twisted. Why? He asked finally, turning to his father. Why destroy a family? Why all of this for a piece of land? Sterling's face hardened. Because it's not just land, Grayson. It's the largest freshwater reserve in the region. It's our future, our survival. And that justifies everything? Grayson asked, his voice trembling with rage. A flicker of something darker passed through Sterling's eyes. Just like adopting you justified our future. Silence. What are you talking about? Grayson said, stepping back. You really thought it was coincidence? Sterling laughed bitterly. That you spent 6 months in that orphanage? Your mother died in childbirth. Our son died too. You were just available, convenient, no baggage, no one to come looking. Grayson's entire body went cold. You adopted me as a replacement? Before anyone could speak, Charlotte stepped forward. She held out a manila folder. I thought something was off, she said. So I did my own research before our business merger. Turns out, Grayson wasn't the only child your company illegally adopted. She turned to Riley and Grayson, her voice ice. You're not just connected by a childhood promise. You're half-siblings. Riley gasped. Marcus confirmed it with a nod. Same mother, different fathers. The documents were forged to keep it secret. Riley and Grayson locked eyes. Same ring, same eyes, same truth. Now ask yourself this, if your entire identity was built on a lie, if the person you loved turned out to be your sibling, if your childhood was stolen to secure someone else's empire, would you stay silent? Or would you burn it all down to reclaim the truth? Riley didn't speak. Her breath caught somewhere between her chest and her throat, the weight of it all pressing in. Grayson, too, was frozen. The floor seemed to tilt beneath him. It wasn't just about the land, the lies, or the empire anymore. This was about them, their bond, a childhood promise, a broken past, and now blood. Evelyn stepped forward slowly, her hands trembling, tears streaking her cheeks. I gave you that ring, she said, her voice hoarse from years of silence. I gave it to you, Grayson, before Sterling took you away. He told you it came from your birth mother, but it didn't. It was mine. It was our family's. Riley stared at the ring on her finger, then back at her mother. You knew who he was all along? I suspected, Evelyn admitted. When I saw your newspaper clippings, I recognized him. The eyes, the name. I prayed I was wrong. In the hallway, the distant wail of police sirens began to rise, closer and louder with each passing second. Grayson turned to Sterling, anger flashing in his eyes. You manipulated everything, he said. Even who I am. You needed a family, Sterling said flatly. And I needed a son. The math worked out. You destroyed her family to fix yours, Grayson snapped. You locked up her mother. You stole her childhood. You made me part of it. And yet here you are, Sterling said, voice laced with mockery, dressed like a savior, parading in front of the press with the truth. You think exposing me makes you the hero? No, Grayson said, pulling out his phone and ending the recording. It makes me free. The police arrived moments later, swarming the building with calm precision. Sterling Hale didn't resist. He straightened his jacket, flashed his signature smirk for the cameras, and walked out like a man who still believed in his own invincibility. But as the doors closed behind him, there was no applause, only silence. The headlines exploded the next morning. Hale Empire crumbles. CEO arrested in historic fraud and kidnapping case. From power to prison. Sterling Hale's downfall. Secrets, siblings, and stolen land. The truth behind the billion-dollar complex. The fallout was immediate. Stock prices plummeted. Partnerships dissolved. Philanthropic awards were rescinded. What had once been the pride of the Hale brand, the Aurora complex, was now a symbol of everything they had buried. Corruption, theft, and generational betrayal. But amidst the chaos, something else happened. Something quieter, but just as powerful. Riley stood at a podium, flanked by Grayson and Evelyn, holding up a new deed. This land belonged to the Dawson family, she told the press. It was taken by force, by manipulation, by greed. But today, it returns to the community. There was no corporate ribbon cutting, no champagne flutes, just applause. Raw, genuine applause from reporters, townspeople, and even former Hale employees who had quietly rooted for the truth. The complex was repurposed. Instead of a corporate HQ, the land became an environmental reserve, featuring a water conservation center and a community education space for orphaned youth and under-resourced families. A full circle healing what was broken. The Olivia Foundation was born from the ashes of the Hale Empire. 6 months later, Hope Mechanical looked different. Brighter, bigger. The tools were newer. The paint was fresh. But the soul remained. Grease stains on the floor, the comforting smell of oil and metal. And Riley, bent over an engine, sleeves rolled up, hair in that same practical bun. Grayson sat across from her, going through a stack of grant applications. He looked different, too. Softer around the edges, lighter, somehow. "You ever get used to it?" Riley asked, wiping her hands. "Waking up and realizing everything you thought was real wasn't?" Grayson chuckled, a dry but genuine sound. "Not yet, but knowing who I actually am, that part's kind of freeing." He touched the small wooden bird brooch, now worn as a pendant around his neck. "It's strange. We lost 20 years, but somehow, it feels like we're right where we were meant to be." Riley nodded, then smirked. "Yeah, just with better tools." At that moment, Evelyn entered carrying a tray of lemonade, her eyes shining with peace she hadn't felt in decades. The three of them, mother, daughter, son, shared a glance. Not perfect, but real. The ring caught the sunlight again. Evelyn looked at it and smiled. That ring kept us connected, even when we didn't know it. Grayson glanced at Riley, then down at the ring on her finger. "It's more than metal and stone. It's a reminder." "Of what?" Riley asked. "That sometimes," he said, "the smallest thread, like a promise, a carving, a ring, is what pulls the whole truth back into the light." A few weeks later, Riley and Grayson stood in the old square of Aurora City, the same place where they had reunited. This time, a small crowd had gathered, not reporters, not shareholders, just neighbors, friends, and kids from the local orphanage. A new sign was unveiled. Dawson Family Resource Center, built on truth, run with hope. Riley turned to Grayson. "You could have walked away. You didn't have to dig, or help, or stay." "I did walk away," he said quietly. 20 years ago. I didn't even know it. But I walked away from everything that mattered. I wasn't going to make that mistake twice. They stood in silence for a while, watching the children run through the open field, once the site of legal battles, now alive with laughter and healing. "What now?" Riley asked. "We build," Grayson replied. "Not a company, not an empire, but something that actually lasts." Later that night, in the back office of the workshop, Grayson opened a letter addressed to him. It was from a law firm representing a group of other adopted children tied to the Hale Empire's secret program. "We think there may be dozens more like you," it read. "We're looking into starting a class action lawsuit." He looked up at Riley, who had just walked in. "It's not over," he said. "It never is," she replied. "But we're not alone anymore." They exchanged a quiet smile. One that said everything words couldn't. A promise this time not broken. But here's the question, and it's for you watching this. If your story had been stolen, if your name, your mother, your truth had been buried under corporate ambition for decades, would you stop now, or would you keep digging, knowing what you find might shatter everything, but could finally set others free? 2 months later, the air in Aurora City felt different. Like something had shifted for good. Riley was under the hood of an electric truck this time, her movements as precise as ever. But now, the workshop buzzed with more than just machines. Young trainees walked around with clipboards, learning from her, from Marcus, from what the place had become, part garage, part mentorship program. Across the lot, Grayson stood speaking with a city planner. Plans for a public garden and a water filtration station were taking shape. Nothing extravagant, just necessary, just right. Inside the refurbished office, Evelyn sat at the computer, helping file tax forms for families that once had no support. Her eyes, once dulled by years of isolation, were bright with purpose again. Then came the letter. It arrived in a plain envelope, postmarked from Santiago, Chile. Riley opened it cautiously. Inside, a short note, unsigned. I knew your mother. I worked with her before she vanished. She wasn't the only one Hale silenced. If you're willing to keep digging, there's more you should know. A friend. Enclosed was a single page from a medical file and a photocopy of a land map. Both documents linked to something called Orion Program. Riley turned the pages over and over, eyes narrowing. Grayson stepped in. Everything okay? She handed him the documents silently, his jaw tensed. You ever heard of this before? Only as a section in the orphanage, Riley replied. That's where we met. Orion section. But this looks like more. Grayson flipped the medical file over. This isn't just about adoption records. Look, gene mapping, psychological profiling, health scores. They weren't just placing kids. They were selecting them. Riley leaned against the table, arms crossed. Are you saying we were part of some kind of program? Grayson didn't answer immediately. Instead, he opened his laptop and began pulling up archived files. Some were encrypted, others just buried deep. Minutes later, he turned the screen to her. A blurry image filled the display, a photograph of a child, curly hair, wide eyes, familiar. Below it, a caption. Subject 12, behavioral traits, adaptive, high resilience, no familial interference, status, transferred. Riley stared. That's me, she whispered. Grayson clicked through a few more entries. He froze on the next one. Subject 14, male, early leadership indicators, responsive to authority, status, integrated into Hale legacy. That's you, Riley said. They sat in silence, the fluorescent light buzzing above them. The room suddenly felt too small. This isn't just about us, Grayson said finally. This was systemic. My father didn't just steal land, he trafficked identity. He treated children like assets. Riley looked back at the letter. So whoever sent this, whoever they are, they want us to keep going. Grayson nodded. Then we will. That night, back at the Hale estate, which now sat empty except for legal auditors and cleaning crews, Grayson wandered through the echoing halls of what once felt like home. He paused at the old study, the same place he had uncovered the Project Aurora file. Behind a painting, he found something new, a small safe. The code came to him too easily. 124, his supposed birthday. Inside were several USB drives, a worn notebook, and a locked phone. He took everything. The next morning at the workshop, he and Riley reviewed the files. What they found made their stomachs turn. There were names, dozens of them. Children. All taken from orphanages, rural clinics, displaced families. All given new names, new birthdays, new fates. The Orion program wasn't just a fluke. It was a design. Evelyn entered just as they reached the last file. Your father was never interested in raising a son, she said, voice quiet but firm. He was building a successor. Riley turned to her mother. You knew? I knew pieces. I suspected more, she said. But no one would listen. No one wanted to go against Sterling Hale, not until now. Later that day, they held a private press conference. No spotlights, just truth. Grayson stood at the mic. I used to believe my last name meant something, that I had earned everything I built. But I was wrong. I was chosen for convenience, not because I belonged. And so were many others. Children manipulated, families destroyed, all to serve one man's empire. He looked over at Riley, then down at his notes. I am no longer a Hale. I reject that name, that legacy, and everything it stood for. Riley stepped up beside him. We're launching a new investigation, she said. With support from whistleblowers and former employees, we're tracing every child affected by the Orion program. We're going to bring the truth out, every name, every story, every injustice. The room erupted in quiet applause. No fanfare, no spectacle. Just respect. The following week, Riley and Grayson were interviewed by a national news outlet. The story went viral. Corporate heir rejects empire, fights for the truth behind secret child placement program. The ring, the promise, the truth, a sibling bond that exposed an empire. And across the country, emails started pouring in. Former staff, other adoptees, people who had pieces of the puzzle, now eager to speak. At night, in the workshop office, Grayson flipped through a printed message from a nurse named Rosita. I worked at the New Hope Clinic. I knew Evelyn. They told us she died in childbirth, but we all knew it was a lie. Riley looked over his shoulder. We have to meet her. We will, Grayson said. They were barely sleeping anymore, but they weren't tired. They were alive, awake, driven. A few days later, while Grayson organized evidence for a federal hearing, Riley took a quiet drive through the valley beyond the town. She stopped at a hilltop where wildflowers had started to grow over the land once marked for corporate expansion. She stood there, the wind tugging at her shirt, the sky bleeding into gold. In her hand, she held the ring, her mother's ring, now hers. She didn't cry, not anymore. Instead, she whispered, We're not done yet. From a distance, a drone hovered silently, filming the land. Back in the workshop, Grayson received the live feed. He watched as Riley stood tall against the wind, the image of quiet defiance. He took a screenshot, a moment, a symbol, a cover for the Foundation's next campaign. Beneath it, the tagline, Truth is worth fighting for. Part 5, with American character names. Weeks passed, then months. The Olivia Foundation grew into something no one had seen coming. Not just a nonprofit, but a movement. A network of survivors, families, and whistleblowers emerged. Some came with stories, others with proof. Most arrived carrying a quiet pain they had buried for years. The truth had become contagious. One morning, Riley arrived early at the workshop. Grayson was already there, organizing new documents. His sleeves were rolled up, hair messy, focus unshaken. We've got something, he said without looking up. She set down her coffee. More names? He nodded. 32. From the same orphanage, same time frame. Different last names now, all relocated to distant cities, but the patterns match. Riley took a breath. This isn't just about one family anymore. This is national. It's generational, Grayson said, and if we don't keep pushing, it'll happen again. He opened a drawer and handed her a legal petition. Olivia v. Hale Industries, a civil lawsuit on behalf of displaced minors, a class action, backed by 3 major law firms, dozens of witnesses, and reams of classified documents that had finally been declassified thanks to public pressure. This'll make enemies, Riley warned. We already have them, Grayson said, then smiled faintly. But we've also got each other. That evening, they drove to the hill where Riley had stood months ago, the one overlooking the land that had once been promised to a corporation, now protected by law as a conservation site. Grayson stepped out first, breathing the clean air. Riley followed, scanning the horizon. Below them, construction had begun. Not for a building, but a public learning center, designed by community architects and funded by small donations. No glossy marketing, just grassroots support. Grayson pulled a folded piece of paper from his jacket. "I've been working on something." Riley raised an eyebrow. "Please tell me it's not another speech." "No," he said, laughing. "Well, maybe, just not for the press." He handed it to her. Handwritten. A letter. "Dear Riley, I never came back when I promised, and I can never undo that. But fate has a strange way of bringing us where we're supposed to be, even if it takes 20 years. You were never just the girl under the tree. You were the anchor, the reminder of a version of myself that still believed in promises. You still are. Now I know the truth about who we are, who our mother is, and what was stolen from us. But I also know what we've built from it. You turned a workshop into a sanctuary. You turned your pain into fuel. You turned me, someone raised to uphold a lie, into someone who can finally tell the truth. I don't know what comes next, but I want to face it with you, not as a CEO, not as a Hale, as your brother. G." When Riley looked up, her eyes were glassy but dry. "That's the first time you ever wrote a letter that didn't involve a press release," she joked. "Growth," Grayson said with a shrug. They laughed, the kind of laugh that comes only after everything else has broken and started to mend. The days rolled on. The lawsuit gained traction, sparking national debate on child welfare laws, corporate oversight, and the ethics of legacy wealth. Riley and Grayson were invited to speak in front of congressional committees. Their testimony was broadcast live, watched by millions. And then came the verdict. Hale Industries, stripped of its assets. Sterling Hale, sentenced for conspiracy, fraud, unlawful adoption, and unlawful detainment. Additional charges were pending as more victims came forward. But the most profound justice wasn't in the courtroom. It was in the faces of those who'd once felt invisible. Kids who had never known their origins now had a place to begin the search. Families long separated were starting to reconnect. People who had suffered in silence now had language and support for their stories. The Olivia Foundation expanded to 4 states. Marcus ran the new auto skills program. Evelyn taught art therapy through wood carving. Riley managed the workshop and directed the foundation's field efforts. And Grayson, he became the face of reform. Not in a suit, but in jeans and work boots, shaking hands with social workers and helping build shelters brick by brick. One day, Evelyn invited Riley and Grayson to her small cottage by the lake. The place had been quiet for years, abandoned after she was taken. Now it was blooming again. Wildflowers lining the porch, fresh paint, laughter. "I found something," she said, handing Riley a box. Inside, childhood drawings, letters. One was a birthday card Riley had made when she was 5. "I thought these were gone," Riley whispered. "I hid them," Evelyn replied. "The day I ran, I stuffed them in a wall panel. I didn't know if I'd ever see you again, but I wanted something to survive." Grayson reached in and pulled out a small wooden carving of a bird. It matched the brooch. "We used to make these together," he said, "before everything fell apart." Riley touched it gently, and somehow it brought us back. Later, the 3 of them sat on the porch, watching the sun dip below the water. No headlines, no reporters, no weight pressing down on their shoulders. Just family. Evelyn leaned into her children, one on each side. "I lost 20 years, she said softly. "But I got them back. Not the same, maybe, but real." Grayson looked at Riley. "We started this looking for answers," he said. She nodded. "And we found them. But we also found each other." They didn't speak after that. They didn't need to. Some stories don't end in declarations or dramatic fades to black. They end quietly, where they began with people, trying, healing, choosing truth over legacy. And that sapphire ring, it stayed on Riley's finger, not as a symbol of pain anymore, but as a reminder that even the most tangled lies can unravel, that even the most broken bonds can be rebuilt, and that sometimes a promise delayed is still a promise kept. If this story resonated with you, if it made you think about truth, family, or second chances, make sure you subscribe to the channel, because we believe in stories that don't just entertain, but remind us that healing is possible, even after years, even after silence. Thank you for watching. For